And this today we're going to receive that report to give the opportunity to the executive and the commissioners to interact with members of the committee. Will receive the readiness or the festive season. You recall that during the Easter holidays, we did receive the preparation or readiness. And I must say that we did upload the work of BMA in terms of how they've managed to navigate through that period. And I think is the update on the preparation for this the festive season. We'll also receive the update on the process in terms of the structure, the operation of the BMA, where we are in terms of the work since it has been established, and also the draft regulations that they will be presenting before the committee. I will then allow Mr. Matonsi to run on the item 2 if there are any apologies, and then we'll invite the executive to indicate attendance and if apologies, and therefore they will introduce the reports. We'll deal with all the 3 reports at once, and then members will then interact with the reports after this representation has been made to the committee, to attention of the committee. Thank you, Mr. Matonsi.
Yes, Chairperson, I've got Ms. Lehwase. She said she's joining the Defense Committee on Oversight. Ms. Mlegwa, she's attending disclosure in Parliament. And then these are the 2 main apologies. Mr. Play is the meeting by the chair. That's all from my side.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are the apologies noted. Any other apology? Okay, none. Can I then invite the executive to introduce the report and attendance of the team? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson and honorable members of the committee. Since this is mainly the issue of BMA, I will ask the BMA Commissioner to make introductions, and then from there, because Home Affairs is also available, I will then allow the DG also to make introductions from the department. Thank you. Commissioner Dr. Masiapato, please.
No, thank you very much, Minister, and thanks for the opportunity, Chairperson of the committee. Of the introductions, my name is Mike Masiapato, the Commissioner for the Border Management Authority, and I'm accompanied by the 2 Deputy Commissioners, Deputy Commissioner General David Chilembe, who is responsible for operations, as well as the Deputy Commissioner for Corporate Services, Madam Jane Tupana. So I will then stop there just on the basis of the colleagues from the Border Management Authority, and I suppose the DG will then cover the rest of the colleagues. DG.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, Minister. Good morning, Deputy Minister and members of the committee. So online, we also joined from the department by Mr. Yusuf Simons, the acting DDG for immigration, the CFO, Mr. Gordon Hollamby, and then there's Advocate Moses Malagate as well from our legal unit, Bongi Gwala, who's Chief Director responsible for communications in the department. I suppose Commissioner has introduced Mr. Jane Ravera from the Project Management Office, and then there's David Hlabane as well from Communications, and Mozi Njoko from the Minister's Office, and then Senzo as well from the Deputy Minister's Office, and then lastly CC Atoza and DDG Tulani Mavuso and Thomas Igama also in attendance, including the CIO. That's the team from our side. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the introductions. I'm not sure, I'm sure. Let me not say I'm not sure. I will request the executive to, if there's a remark to be made, to run on that, or if they will want to come after the presentation is also fine. Can I get that indication? Which one will be comfortable?
No, Chairperson, we believe you have summarized the purpose and what's going to happen today very well. There's nothing to add. Will come after the presentations and the questions. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner, thank you. Commissioner Masiapat will take the 3 presentation. You will then assist the committee on how we are going to run on the 3. If the 3 presentations be run by 3 commissioners, you must indicate before, or if you're going to run all of them yourself, you must give us an indication. Commissioner?
No, thank you very much, Chair. Just to indicate the 3 presentations as per the agenda item. The first presentation on the festive season preparedness will then be rendered by General Chilembe, as I've indicated, the Deputy Commissioner Operations, and the one on the update on the operationalization of the Border Management Authority, I will then deliver that one. And of course, the one on the regulations will then be rendered in by Advocate Malakati. So as per the agenda, we will then start with the festive season, and then I will follow, and then the advocate will. So I'm now sharing the presentation, and General will be able to start from there.
Okay, thank you very much, General Chilembe.
Good morning, Honorable Chair and honorable members of the Portfolio Committee, the Minister and the Deputy Minister present, the DG and other senior officials. Thank you for the opportunity for the BMA to be able to present the 2022-23 festive season operation that will be taking place at all our ports of entry. Honorable Chair, the purpose of the presentation is to provide the Portfolio Committee on the update regarding the preparations made towards the 2022-23 safer festive season operations at all declared ports of entry and the vulnerable segments of the borderline. And further, Chair, is to show and indicate the directions and guidance that we have provided to all port structures for the seamless planning on this festive season operation. Chairperson, I think I must make this statement that the plan that we are going to present today, it's something that follows up on the previous operations that we have made in the border environment, especially the Easter period that we had previously. And also to also mention, Chairperson, that this 22-23 festive season operations will be the first one post the COVID-19, and there will be no restrictions in accordance to the COVID-19. So we anticipate, based on that, we anticipate a high number of travelers based on the fact that there won't be so much restrictions on the ground. It is therefore critical that a comprehensive guidelines should have been made by us to the people on the ground in order to guide them to come up with a seamless plan that would be dealing with this issue as we approaching it. Chairperson, the contents of the presentation will be divided into the key principles that were followed for the operational planning, the operational concept. It will also have the threat and risk assessment. On the threat and risk assessment, Chairperson, we have attached a PDF document that will be dealing with all those identified threat and risk assessment with their mitigation. I don't know whether we'll be able to deal with that when we come to that point that we show the PDF document that talks to the mitigation processes that we have dealt with. Then further on, Chairperson, we're going to talk about the phase 1 planning, which already started as early as October, and will be ending by 6 December 2022. Our phase 2 execution will start on the 7th of December to 11th of January 2023. Then our phase 3 will be talking about the demobilization process that we are going to follow after the end of the festive season. Then it will be a recommendation. Next slide. Chairperson, the key principles for the operation planning will dwell on various issues that we have mentioned in this slide. First, it will ensure sound collaboration, because currently, as the BMA has not really been operating on its own, but we're using the multi-agency approach where we are coordinating it. We have to ensure the sound collaboration between all stakeholders in the operational area at all border areas. And also the enforcement of all legislative and regulatory frameworks within the border environment. And further on, to prevent and intercept any threats that may be posed during this period. Next slide. Chairperson, this slide talks about the operational concept that we are going to follow. The concept is based on the facilitation of the movement of people and goods at all our ports of entry, and also to ensure that there's a balance between trade and security by doing the trade facilitation, and also ensuring that we create a situation where there will be no obstacles for passenger movement, and also the control of the movement of travelers entering or leaving South Africa, and then ensuring that all the illegal movement across the borderline are intercepted by ensuring the interdiction of people, goods, and animal movement in those areas. Next slide. Chairperson, this slide is just an outline of the threat and risk assessment that the intelligence communities have identified. First is that the ICC, which included the SSA, crime intelligence, and defense intelligence, have identified various issues that are a part of the risk and vulnerabilities that always takes place in the port of entries. And also they've identified the issues of public health risk that comes with the importation of communicable diseases, personal integrity challenges, insider threat, and collusion that our members may be involved in. Then also the smuggling or cross-border transportation or clearing agents that takes place in the environment. As I've mentioned, Chairperson, that we have attached a PDF document. I don't know whether Commissioner will be able to show that document, that PDF document that talks to the threat and risk that we have attached in this presentation. I can't see it being shown.
No, let's proceed, General. The document was attached for further reading. I think we can proceed with the presentation. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Chair, maybe just to run quickly through the threat and risk. The first one was based on the blockage of roads or the corridor management towards the port of entry that was identified as part of the risk, where in terms of mitigation, we have requested the outside structures, the police, the municipalities, the traffic that are operating outside the port of entry in order to deal with those issues towards the port of entries. They're conducting off-road blocks towards the port in order to ease traffic towards the port. The next one was the issue of the public strike, that we have to come up with measures that should the strike continue, the contingency there or the mitigation was that we have to train those members of essential service, the police and also the border guards, to be immigration officers should we encounter that issue for them to take over that function. The other factor that was raised was the issue of the power outages. We have made sure that each and every port of entry have got what we called the repair and maintenance program contracts by the Department of Public Works in order to deal with all eventualities should there be load shedding or any other outages, to make sure that the generators and everything is in working condition. The other issue that was pointed out was the issue of the disaster management, that all our ports should play a role into the regional disaster management structures, and also in terms of the provincial structures, should there be any issue that will need disaster management. In terms of network challenges on the systems, that has also been raised, that we have made sure that all the border law enforcement entities that have invested in the modernization of their systems, in order that whenever we have such...
Chairperson.
Hello?
My apologies, Chairperson. I'm not sure whether I'm the only one who is lost. I can hear the Deputy Commissioner is rattling on, and there's a slide on the screen. I don't see any of the things he's talking about, and nothing is moving. I'm not sure whether it's on my side. I just wanted to find out, but I'm apologizing for disturbing the flow of the meeting.
Commissioner Mashapata, I have a document with me. I'm following him, but if we, for the benefit of the public, if we can just look at that, Commissioner Mashapata or General Chilembe.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chair. Minister, what is basically the point is that the threat and risk assessment, we have attached it and we have distributed it to the committee members, Minister. So the general is just reflecting a bit on some of those threats, and then from there we'll go further into the presentation. We had thought that if we bring all of those here, it will be more of a bigger presentation. That is why it's just summarizing them, and then we proceed, Minister. Thanks, Chair.
There's a line there, it says full document is attached as an extra A. Minister, are you comfortable with the reasoning from your team?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank
you.
Proceed,
No, I get
General
it.
Chilembe.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, Minister. Let's move then, Commissioner, to the next slide, please. Thank you, Chair. This slide, Chair, then it starts to discuss about the activities that we are going to do during the planning phase. As I've mentioned earlier, but the planning phase started as early as October 2022 and will end on the 6th of December 2022. In other words, as we speak, we're still under the planning phase. And the issues that we looked at in the planning phase as salient issues was the consolidation and the finalization of the national plan, and also the consolidation of all the ports. In other words, all the ports in South Africa, we have their draft plans that are in line with these directives that I'm currently presenting. And further on, we have also applied to the Minister of Home Affairs the extension of operational hours based on those plans that we have consolidated, because we have seen that the port on the ground have requested that some ports of entries, they are asking that we should extend their operational hours. In the next presentation slide, I will show the ports that we have extended in terms of the operational hours. We have further also requested infrastructural requirements, because we have learned on this that we need to assist outside the port of entry in terms of infrastructural requirements that are needed, like your mobile toilets, water, or any lights that would be needed during this period. In the following slides, I will also show those requirements, that what kind of infrastructure that we have requested from the Department of Public Works. We have also requested approval of extra HR from all departments, and also for their overtime. And we have made sure that the numbers that they requested and the overtime have been approved by those specific departments. Then the second last one is the briefing of relevant structures, as we are doing now to the portfolio committee. Yesterday, we presented the presentation to the net joints in order for them to take it through the cascading authorities through their structures. Then we're going to disseminate this operational plan with the attachment of each and every plan from all the ports to the accounting officers. As I've mentioned earlier, that we are part of the multi-agency approach. Next slide. In this slide, Chairperson, we are now showing the areas where they've applied for the extension of operational hours. I am not going to bore you more on this, but just to show that areas like Yokosi Bay, Mahamba, Sanipas, they've requested extra operational hours. But areas like your Bait Bridge, Libombo, and Maseru Bridge and Fixback, they are on 24-hour basis. So they have not requested operational hours, but these are the small ports that have got impact on the festive season, and the minister has already signed the extension of those operational hours. Next slide. In this slide, Chairperson, we are showing the extra human resources per specific department that they have requested to assist during the festive season operation. The one that is on the slide now is the Home Affairs immigration numbers or additional capacity that they have requested. I'm not going to also bore you more, but you can see there, Bait Bridge, Libombo, they've requested extra 75, and Libombo extra 60, and over time has been approved for those officials to work at those ports through the festive season operation. Next slide. This is the slide from the South African Police Service Chairperson that they have also requested extra personnel. You will note that the mostly these ports that you see here are the ones that appears at each and every issue, because these are the ones that are really problematic or that are giving us a serious challenge. With regard to the South African Police Service, as I've mentioned earlier, that we have to deal with the issue of the corridor, not inside the port of entry, but the corridor towards the port of entry. Hence, the South African Police Service have given us extra public order police members who will be dealing with the issues of the crowd and the trucks that will be on the line outside the port of entry. Next slide, please. This is a slide from the SARS Customs with their additional personnel that they've requested for the ports in question. Next slide. This one, Chairperson, is the one that comes from the South African National Defence Force. As the function, the festive season is both port of entry and borderline. Those are the numbers that the defence have currently that they will be using in this festive season operation, and they are part of our plans on daily basis. So they will be looking at the borderline and the vulnerable segments of the borderline with the border guards. So it is divided into the provinces. Those are the numbers that appears there. Next slide. In terms of the border guards, Chairperson, as you know, that we have the 200 border guards that we unleashed during July this year. This is how the first levels, the way in which they are going to be deployed at the various ports of entries. Beitbridge will be having 40, Geriondo 22, Libombo 39, and Osho 23. Yeah, it goes like that until at the end. Next slide, please. In terms of the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development and the Department of Health, they did not request extra resources or extra staff or additional staff. However, what they've requested was overtime, that their personnel at all the ports of entries will be able to work overtime, and the departments have also sourced the overtime for them to be paid. Next slide. This slide, Chairperson, talks to the Department of Forestry and Fisheries. They are not at all ports of entry, but they are at various specific ports. In fact, they are starting to capacitate themselves in those areas. So there'll be more involved at Kopfontein, which is a border between ourselves and Botswana, and Telebridge between ourselves and Lesotho, and Mahamba and Golela. And they've indicated that there will be no additional staff that will be deployed, but they will have applied for the necessary overtime. Next slide. Next slide, Commissioner. This slide talks to the maritime and coastal operations. We are saying maritime operations in seaports during the end of the year or peak season are mainly characterized by an increase of cruise liners. So the plan for those areas have also been made to go to be part of the operational Pakisa, but there are extra members that will be put in place in order to conduct the joint law enforcement at those areas. But this is specifically more at harbors and at smaller fishing harbors, launching areas and the yacht basins and the slipways that are in the port environment. Next slide. This slide, Chairperson, that it then indicates the infrastructure that we have requested at all the ports of entries through the Department of Public Works. And I will not really go through all of them, but just to mention that, for example, at Beitbridge, they've requested 900 meter cross crowd management barricades, 20 plastic chairs, 12 insect trappers, 9 tents, chemical toilets, potable water tanks, additional cleaners, and standby generators. As I've mentioned, that at night in the corridor, we'll need those generators in order to have light in those roads. The sunscreens, sanitizers, and additional water for the travelers that will be lining up at those borders. Next slide, please. The next slide also it's a continuation of the infrastructure that has been requested, especially by the Free State borders, your Maseru Bridge. They've also requested some infrastructure. Next slide. This slide also, slide number 21, also deals with the issue of the temporary infrastructure. We are just showing here, Chairperson, that each and every port, what is it that they've requested and what is it that has been covered and approved by the Department of Public Works. Next slide. I think we can go up to slide number 23.
Chairperson,
Yes, Mr. Matonsi.
I'm not sure if I was cut off. I can't hear anything.
Commissioner?
We also can't. I'm sure it's out.
Yeah. No,
Commissioner,
Honorable Chair.
my Shepherd, if you can just proceed.
Yeah, that's okay. I think General might have been cut.
Thank
Maybe
you.
just to indicate, Honorable Chair and members, that indeed that was the planning phase, as it were, and it is supposed to end by the 6th of December. And then from the 7th of December, we are going to be starting with the execution phase of the plan. And of course, as indicated, in terms of the execution phase, what it basically means is that all of those plans that had been put on the table are then going to be effected, meaning that the additional staff will start working on the 7th, the additional operating hours will then be activated on the 7th, and all of that additional infrastructure requirements will also be activated on the 7th. So at the end of the day, on a daily basis, we will then have daily operations that are going to be driven more by the port operational plans that we have actually put on the table. And on that basis, we are then going to be having the operational centers where all the stakeholders are going to be engaged on. And that engagement includes all the stakeholders inside the country, but also stakeholders from outside the country, which effectively mean our immediate neighbors. And of course, our interface with the SANDF, SARS, as well as SAPS, as provided for in law, are also going to be on the space in terms of dealing with all of those issues. And of course, the bigger issue here is to make sure that there is a clear enforcement of the laws, as it were, in terms of border law enforcement, as well as the regulatory frameworks. And of course, the main issue is also to be able to pick up instances where there will be some potential risks around the environment. But at the same time, we also have the colleagues deployed on the ground to pick up any possible corrupt tendencies that might actually take place on the environment. And ultimately, part of the objective is to also ensure that we facilitate as much as possible those that are moving legitimately, but at the same time dealing with those that are seeking to create some challenges. And of course, the issue of congestion is one of those that becomes the key in terms of the movement of cargo and the like. And we have started those conversations with the Freight Forwarders Association, as it were. Now, in terms of the next part is around the factors that actually will then affect the execution of the plan. So in here, we are talking more about managing the corridors en route to the port, which then becomes one of the most critical issues in terms of making sure that border operation becomes more easier, especially when the corridor is effectively addressed. And of course, on that basis, we are then engaging with a number of stakeholders to that extent, particularly those that are in the transport department, as it were. So the issue around the traffic contingencies that we have set up with the Road Traffic Management Corporation in particular, especially towards the three key ports, which is Beitbridge, Lubombo, and Maseru, all of those issues are actually on par, as we speak. And of course, the main intention is to make sure that there is improved flow of traffic, especially around the designations of the various vehicles types that needs to be able to be moving on the road. That is why you might have heard when the general spoke earlier, he had also indicated some of the barricades that we have requested as additional resources on the space. And maybe we can also add, Honorable Chair and members, that we have also spoken to the SANDF. They have their big trucks on standby. In instances where your heavy duty vehicles get stuck on the corridor, we should be able to clear the corridor on that basis. So we are fairly ready with all of those contingencies together with the colleagues. And of course, the issue around the signage, we've been working to improve on all of that. And of course, as I've indicated, the barricades and also the marshalling in terms of the movement of persons. So, Chair, I do know the General is now back into the call. General, if you can proceed on slide number 26.
No, I think it's still struggling.
Still struggling, that's okay. No, let me proceed, Honorable Chair. No, then the next part obviously is around the issues of a clear separation of the incoming and outgoing passengers. One of the biggest challenges that we have learned in the previous implementation of the plan was instances where you find that there is a kind of a conflation of those that are actually exiting the country and those that are coming in. So now we have designed a clear separation between the two so that there is a very clear flow in as far as that part is concerned. And that is why we have also created dedicated counters that are going to be dealing with some of the high volume travelers. We do have instances where some of the travelers, especially from the mines, coming from the Northwest, going into Mozambique in particular, they come through in big volumes. And on that basis, we have dedicated counters to be able to handle those kind of high volume people, as it were. So each and every port we are then on the set from the 7th, we are going to activate the venue operational center, which is the VOC, so that we can be able to make sure that the implementation of the plan is closely followed through and it is effectively implemented accordingly. In terms of the ICT, we have our colleagues from information services on standby to be able to make sure that we don't have any system downtime or any system challenges, as it were. In terms of the Freight Forwarders Association, as I've indicated, we have already had a conversation with them, as we did in April, by the way, to indicate that, especially on the 24th and also on the 31st, that they wouldn't necessarily have to then send high volumes of trucks to go compete with the people in terms of exiting the country. And we've been working very well with them on that kind of an arrangement. And they have actually committed that indeed they are not necessarily going to be doing that. Because that is one of the issues that we have picked up in the previous festive period, that you find that there are high volumes of trucks exactly on the same day, which is the apex in terms of people movement. And on that basis, it then conflates the entire environment and becomes highly unmanageable. So to that extent, we have agreed with them that they will reduce the velocity of trucks. And to that extent, we will be able to get people off. And then from there, the following day, then we activate the entire model, as it were. In terms of media and communication, we are basically indicating here that in terms of the overall communication of the activities around the issues of port management, as it were, the communication team from the Department of Home Affairs has been given that responsibility to coordinate this particular work, working together with our colleagues from the communication overall department of GCIS. So in that extent, they are more coordinating the entire issues, and therefore they drive the ultimate communication in as far as that part is concerned. And of course, in this instance, the overall political communicator will be the chairperson of the Interministerial Committee on Border Management, which is Minister Motsoaledi. And of course, the Commissioner BMA will then be able to come also through to reflect on some of the technical issues, as it were. Now, in terms of overall command and control, honorable members, because we have indicated earlier that we are still in this current financial year, we still coordinate this work as we work towards the 1st of April next year. So the Deputy Commissioner Operations will then be sitting at the operational center at the national level, coordinating with all of the various venue operational centers out there in terms of doing the work. The port managers, these are the managers of the port committees or the port management committees, are the main, I will say, link back into HQ level in terms of the communication, but of course, linking up with the provincial joint structures in terms of the implementation of the plan. And of course, in terms of the overall development of the plan as well as the sending out of issues of concern, the National Border Management Coordinating Committee is then responsible in as far as that part is concerned. So at the end of the day, one of the key issues is to indicate that because we are still in this coordinating environment, the respective departments, as they have committed in this instance, are still going to be able to make sure that the entire operational management spectrum, as it were, remains seamless, and they continue to support the colleagues on the ground in terms of the implementation of the plan. And of course, the escalating protocols are well defined from the port level up to the NBMCC, as already indicated. So as we move towards the conclusion of this part of the presentation, it's also just to reflect on the command and control mechanism that we are actually using. You will be realizing here that we are also using the joints in terms of the overall engagements in this instance, both at the NAT joint level, but also at the prof joint level. And to that extent, we are able to have all of these issues properly segmented and coordinated up to the level of the Border Management or Border Technical Committee of DGs. And of course, where it becomes critical, we are able to activate the Interministerial Committee for Intervention. So that is basically how we are going to then execute the plan as indicated from the 7th of December until the 12th of December, until the 11th of December. Then on the 12th of, until the 11th of January. So on the 12th of January, we then start the withdrawal or the demobilization phase. So one thing that we need to indicate to the committee members when we talk about the demobilization and the withdrawal phase, we are not necessarily saying that we literally leave everything to the possible extent that they will collapse. What we basically mean is, obviously, the extended operating hours will then go back to the normal. And of course, what it means is all of those mobilized additional staff will then have to go back to their offices. You'll remember some of the additional staff here comes from head offices, for example. So because they won't be active in head offices during that period, that's why we borrow them for the port. And of course, from there, they will start going back into their respective offices. And of course, all the additional infrastructure that we put on the table, because the volumes of even travelers go back to normal, we start taking those things out or back into the space. But in terms of the actual port operations, they continue as it is supposed to be. And that then becomes the ultimate end. So this is then the withdrawal phase. So this is in short the operational plan for the festive season as indicated, 2022-2023, and we just want the committee members to note the plan and of course to support us as we enter into the implementation phase from the 7th of December. And to that extent, we are very much hopeful that we should be able to handle the volumes appropriately until the exit and also the entry back into January. So Honorable Chair and committee members, this is effectively the end of this part of the presentation. So maybe then we can then transition into the second part of the presentation, which is the one that then deals with update in terms of the operationalization of the BMA. So if I can just quickly chair that, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, if you can then confirm that we are now ready for the operationalization update.
You can proceed, Commissioner. Thank you.
That's great. No, thanks, Chair. So maybe just to indicate, this is the presentation that we have been making to the committee. We have committed, as the committee instructed to us, to come to the committee on each and every quarter to give an update in terms of the work that is being done towards the operationalization of the Border Management Authority as a Schedule 3A public entity. So we are coming today to give the third quarter presentation. The committee members will remember that the second quarter presentation we made on the 23rd of August. So in terms of the flow of the presentation of today, what we are going to start by doing is to start by doing a bit of a recap in terms of the key strategic issues that we raised in the previous second quarter brief to this committee. And then after that, we'll then move to speak about the latest issues regarding where we are in terms of preparing ourselves to be a standalone Schedule 3A from the 1st of April. So on that basis, we will then have a look at the vision that has already been put together as part of this work, the vision as well as the operating model that is going to be deployed or used by the BMA from the 1st of April onwards. We will also, on the basis that committee members will remember that with the BMA, we are in the process of establishing the third law enforcement authority in the country after SAPS as well as defense. And to that extent, every law enforcement within this context will then have a ranking structure. So we will then unveil the ranking structure for the noting of the committee members. From there, we'll then reflect on the actual integration of staff as to where are we in terms of the specifics, which will then lead us into a conversation around the BMA permanent organizational structure that will then be implemented from the 1st of April going forward. And we'll give you some bit of feel in terms of where we are in the overall project implementation activities. And then we'll conclude by just for your confidence, showing you the program in terms of staff consultation as we go towards the end of this particular process in terms of the staff integration, as it were, into the BMA from the 4 departments in particular. So let's then start by having that bit of a recap in terms of the previous conversation that we had with yourselves. So in this instance, we will then reflect on the status around the integration as well as the issues around the capacitation. So this part of the brief is more of a recap in terms of where we were on the 23rd, but we'll also give you some bit of latest in as far as we are, in as far as those issues are concerned. In terms of this slide, Honorable Chair and committee members, you will remember this is the National Macro Organization of Government model that we have used, particularly around the issue of the integration of staff. In this instance, you will remember there are staff members that will be coming from the 4 departments in particular into the BMA. So out of that, these are the 6 streams that had to do the work to make sure that that particular work actually happens. So I will just take the committee members quickly on each one of these in terms of the latest, in terms also in terms of the, I would say, the status as it were. You will remember the legal work stream had to identify the sections from the relevant departments, which is Home Affairs, which is Agriculture, which is Health, as well as the Environment. All of the 4 departments, we had to take the sections from their laws into the Border Management Authority. And that process culminated into the president having to sign the proclamation. We can then confirm, I would say a week after we briefed yourselves on the 23rd, which was on the 30th of August, the president did sign the proclamation. What that means is the president had officially moved the functions from the respective departments into the Minister of Home Affairs. And by the way, the Minister of Home Affairs had already signed the delegation of those responsibilities to the Commissioner of BMA in the current financial year through coordination from the 1st of April through integration. And that is the model. That is where we are in as far as that part is concerned. And of course, in terms of the protocols, you'll remember in the previous engagement, we have said all the protocols with defense, SARS and SAPS had actually been signed, everything is set. Again, in terms of the service level agreement, when we spoke to yourselves in August, we indicated we had signed with the National Department of Health. Now we can indicate we've also signed with the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. We are just finalizing the one with the Department of Home Affairs as well as the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment. In terms of human resources work, we can confirm to yourselves that all the affected staff members had up to this point been all identified by name and of course been put on paper as it were. So to that extent, and when we talk about consultation, we are referring to those particular staff members who are now known completely. And of course, in terms of the integrated change management process, we are ready. Hence, we talk about staff consultation. In that program, you will see towards the end of the brief, where we are then going to start engaging around the change itself. And also just to indicate, we had to do this work with close collaboration with Labour Collective through the Public Service Coordinating Bargaining Council. We can now just confirm that we have just finalized the agreement framework that we are going to be using, working with staff to make sure that all of this work is done appropriately. In terms of the finance work stream, we can also indicate that they've done a good job in terms of identifying all the financials in as far as this process is concerned. And we can also indicate the latest issue on this is that all the chief financial officers from the respective departments had signed off on the particular financials, including on the asset values that are supposed to be moving into the Border Management Authority. And we can also indicate, when we presented to yourselves, we have said that we've made submissions in terms of the medium-term expenditure framework to the Minister of Treasury. Today, we are able to indicate that in the medium-term budget policy statement of the minister, which he delivered end of October, on page 42, he did acknowledge that indeed there is money set aside that is going to be used to make sure BMA is established. So to that extent, we can indicate that we are just sitting at a point now whereby we are just waiting for the allocation letter to come from the National Treasury to the BMA to demonstrate the kind of finances that are going to be put on the table for BMA's establishment. In terms of infrastructure, we can confirm all the 31 identified ports had been audited, and up to this point, we're just doing the final touches around the REM contractors in each one of those ports so that we can be able to manage the transition. The 22 remaining land ports, as you will remember, infrastructure-wise, will then be audited in the next financial year so that they can then come into the BMA in 2024-2025 financial year. In terms of the borderline, the minister led a delegation to the discussions with the Minister of Public Works. They are already at advanced stages to be able to rehabilitate the border fence, as it were. And to that extent, it has been agreed at that level that Public Works will then continue to do that infrastructure rehabilitation, and then they will hand over the infrastructure once that has been concluded. In terms of the systems, I will say that the systems have been identified in the ports, the functions have been identified. We are now doing the integration of all of those systems. So when we come 1st of April, we should be able to hit the ground running. And of course, the colleagues from the communication side continues to help us in both internal and external communication in as far as this work is concerned. Now, on this particular slide is just to reflect a bit on the capacitation. This particular slide, we've seen it in the previous conversation. We are just bringing it here to indicate that at all, the vulnerable segments identified are 10, as it were. And I think in terms of the actual deployments, you can see them going down there. And the general had also started to indicate which one is which. But of course, you will be able to see that we have around 14 Beitbridge, which is A, and B, Ben Goriondo, and all of those. Suffice to say that we had to take the contingent from Goriondo and temporarily deploy them in KwaZulu-Natal, Lesotho, as well as Eastern Cape, Lesotho. That is where G and H is located, primarily because they were starting to have issues there in terms of stock theft and all of that. So that is where we are in as far as this part is concerned. And of course, the main question will be, since the deployment of the border guard, what are we able to see in terms of some bit of benefits? What we can say in slide number 7 is just to indicate that since we've deployed the border guards, we've been able to see that both the inner and the outer parameter of the ports had started being sanitized, all of those unaccounted for individuals who had been creating some challenges in the port, some of them being smugglers in Beitbridge, they called them malicious, and all of those had to be addressed to make sure that the port becomes highly sanitized. We're able to see that across all of the various ports where the border guards are actually deployed. In terms of the, for example, in Oshu, they were able to intercept some dacha there. In Sunny Pass, they were able to intercept some firearms. In Maseru Bridge, we were able to deploy the chief border guards to engage with the farmers around the Maseru Bridge area, as well as Fixback to deal with problems of stock theft. And we are able to get reports that they are now able to start neutralizing that particular threat, as it were. In the bigger scheme of things, we're able to account for 27 stolen vehicles that were intercepted by the border guards trying to exit the country particularly in Beitbridge as well as Lubombo. And to that extent, we're able to do the interceptions, and those vehicles were handed over to detectives in the police environment to be able to do further work in as far as that part is concerned. Now, this is in terms of the capacitation aspect of what has actually been happening. If we can then move a bit with speed in terms of just having a view of how the BMA vision will look like, particularly from the 1st of April, and also the mission, as it were, the outcomes and all of them. At this point, we can also confirm that at this point, we're able to develop the strat plan for the BMA, we're able to develop the 5-year targets, and we're also able to develop the annual performance plan targets for the BMA. Suffice to say, at the right time, when the portfolio committee is supposed to be receiving those kind of presentations, we will be bringing a full presentation on the APP for 2023-2024 for the Border Management Authority. For now, we just want to demonstrate to yourselves that we have started doing the work. In terms of a vision, as we unveil it to yourselves today, is that the vision for the BMA is about being a world-class integrated border law enforcement authority, partnering for a safe and prosperous South Africa. That is the nature of the vision that BMA has put on the table. Suffice to say, from a mission is to be a credible provider of highly efficient, integrated, well-coordinated and technology-driven border law enforcement service that contribute to national security and socio-economic development by inculcating an ethical culture that empowers teams for service excellence. And of course, if there is time, we can be able to unpack the rationale for each and every sentence on each of these aspects. Suffice to say, at the bottom part is our value proposition. As you can see it there, it is primarily to make sure that we will need to ultimately have an integrated border management platform with the view of realizing a single command and control, which is very much critical. The end product is promoting socio-economic development of the country, as it were. Now, in terms of outcomes, you will remember in terms of the overall government planning model, we do use the outcome provisions as it stands. So we are accountable for these 4 as conceptualized. The first one is around institutional excellence, distinguished by good corporate governance and ethical leadership. This is what you will call broadly your corporate kind of your outcome. The second outcome is the center of BMA's work, as it were. It's about securing borders that protect our national interest, but at the same time, enhancing our national security. And of course, the third one is around us having to enhance trade as well as socioeconomic development in our jurisdiction. And of course, the last one is about our interface with the rest of the stakeholders, both domestic and otherwise, or international, and that is the nature. On this particular slide, we are just trying to give you some reflection in terms of our operating model, which, as indicated, will be effective from the 1st of April, 2023. We might not necessarily maybe have time, Honorable Chair, to go into each part. Suffice to say, on the left extreme, you will realize there that the 4 departments are accounted for, which by the proclamation of the president will be doing work on their behalf on the ground. And those departments, as I've said, we have to have the SLAs or the service level agreements concluded. So we have done 2, there is 2 to be done, and we are very hopeful in the next few weeks we should be done. And of course, the ones that follows there is the ones in terms of the protocol. These are the ones we must interact with as we do the work on the ground. And of course, the protocols are already done with Defense, Police, and SARS as indicated. There will be a lot of other structures, honorable members, that the BMA is going to ultimately have MOUs with. For example, we've already started having one with what is called Tourism South Africa, for instance. The CBRTA, Cross-Border Road Traffic Agency, as it were, an MOU is actually on the way, including, for example, structures like SAPRA, the South African Health Product Regulatory Authority, in terms of the movement of medicine in and out of our jurisdiction, and a lot of other stakeholders that will still be developing those mechanisms with. So this is the model in terms of operating. You will see core functions across the 3 modalities: land, maritime, aviation, as it were, and all of those support structures. You can see the BTC is there. You can see the IMCC is there from an accountability and governance point of view. And in the extreme right, we start to demonstrate the stakeholders that we have to be doing this work with. So that is the essence. Now, as I have indicated, we are now moving to reflect on the BMA ranking structure. As I have indicated, BMA will be this law enforcement authority in the country. And of course, it has to be ranked and it has to be explicit. Now, whether domestic or global, in terms of the ranking model, there is always 3 categories in as far as this part is concerned, which also find itself even in basic corporate. You will have your senior commissioned officers, which is what will be described as top leadership. And then you will have commissioned officers, which is more of your middle management. And then you will have non-commissioned officers, which is more of your ground forces, as it were. Now, the ranking that we are to unveil to you today, it is also in those 3 categories. Now, if you look at the first level, which is the senior commission, as indicated, I think you will be familiar with the 4-star provision, which is the same even in terms of the police, and of course is similar even in terms of the military. That's where you do have your hexagon there, and then you also have your 4 castles representing the highest level of leadership in the environment. In our case, the person is then the commissioner, and below that is the deputy commissioner, and of course, the assistant commissioner and the deputy assistant commissioner. This is what in government will be described as your senior management service, as it were. And of course, if you can use your government interpretation, you will say at the bottom part there is the director, then the second part there will be your chief director, and your third part will be your DDG, and of course your DG up there. So the model has to be understood in various systems and also in law enforcement. And of course, the form of address, all of these are called commissioners. If you go to the middle management leadership, this is how it looks. The top level there is the commandant. And of course, you go below that is the deputy commandant. And then from there, you have your assistant commandant, and then you have your chief border guard. This is your middle management level. And if you can kind of talk the language of the military at the bottom part, you will say that is the captain. And of course, the second part is a major and it's a lieutenant general, the one before the top, and the top one is a full colonel or a colonel as described. So this is how the BMA is effectively structured. In terms of the symbols, there has to be kind of similar because there has to be those inter-salutations to each other. The naming conventions are actually even understood in the global context. Hence here you can see the form of address is all the 3 commandants. And of course, in terms of the border guard, the chief border guard then becomes the highest level. And that is why the form of address is a chief. This is then the lower level part, we'll say, where the majority of the staff complement of the Border Management Authority will be located. Here we can start the bottom part to indicate when the people exit from college, then they will enter in the BMA as the junior border guards. And as you can see it there, there is no any star at the first point of entry. And of course, these are the ranks that are below the shoulder, as you will remember the principle of commissioning. So in this instance, they start there, and after a while, then they will be able to grow into a 1-star context, and then they become border guards. And of course, from there, their next level of growth will be the 2 stars, which will then be the senior border guard. And then from there, they will enter the next level of leadership. So this is, in short, I would say, the ranking model for the BMA, which will then be effected when BMA is functional in the next financial year. Now, like any other law enforcement authority, whether it's SAPS or it's defense, we do have to have our own flag, and that is how our flag is actually going to look like. As you will know, this is the flag that must be co-hosted with our national flag of the country, as it were. To your right, you will see there is a collar button there, and also there is a button at the bottom part there for your formal dress and all of those kind of issues. Now, arising from this, we can also now move into the actual staff integration model. Now, Chair and members, you will remember this slide. We had this conversation in the previous meeting on the 23rd, but at that time, we were not very specific in terms of the numbers because we were busy finalizing the numbers. So today, we are indicating to the committee that this is the structure in terms of the integration model. And as it were, now we have the signatures from the chiefs of human resources, as well as the chiefs of the financial your CFOs in terms of these numbers. So what it means is from immigration or from the Department of Home Affairs, 1,285 staff complement will be exiting the department by the 31st of March next year, midnight into the BMA for the 1st of April going forward. 339 from health will be coming over. We only have around 14 from the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. And one of the reasons why that low number is because they had a lot of people who had been doing this work on contracts. And of course, those people's contracts is expiring. And to that extent, they wouldn't necessarily be brought in because there's no financial that comes with them, as it were. And of course, 372 coming from agriculture. All in all, we are looking at around 2,010 people that are to be integrated into the BMA. And if you then add those people who came through capacitation of the BMA, you will remember the 200 border guards, there will be the 2 commissioners and some support staff. So all in all, we are looking at around 2,250 or so from the 1st of April going forward as the staff complement of BMA. Now, you will note that all of this must then be integrated, as we've always said, one command and control, each and every port, one commander. And of course, that port commander will be accountable for the 5 functions. Why 5? They've always been 4: immigration, port, health, environment, and agriculture. But access control or border control is that function that BMA is going to be doing, which is in its own act. And this function is currently done by the SAPS, which effectively means we have to gradually take over that responsibility. As we get more capacity, we then take over the access control responsibility. Insignia in this instance talks about what people will be wearing together with their name tag to demonstrate their functionality. What we have decided, honorable members, for this one is that instead of saying people must wear immigration expert, agriculture expert and all, we thought that will continue the perpetuation of disintegration. All of them need to wear a specialist insignia. And of course, the law enforcement guys will wear the law enforcement as well as those for support and those for auxiliary. So in this instance, this is then the practicalities of this part. If you look at the bottom left, you will see the picture there of the border guards as deployed at the date of their unveiling. They will then be wearing that enforcement insignia that is red in color. And of course, if you look at the top part there, those are the corporate uniforms that will be worn by people who will be doing frontline work, whether in terms of immigration, frontline work and the like, at OR Tambo or Beitbridge or Devonport or anywhere out there. And this is how they will look like. And those that are specialists will wear that insignia. Specialists, those that are support will wear the same. And we do have at the who come from agriculture in particular, who are taking care of the border fence for foot and mouth disease. They literally maintain the border fence. They will be wearing an auxiliary insignia. And of course, they will also be wearing a bit of a different rough uniform in the bush, but not similar to the border guard. So that is work Now, arising from that, let me pass this part and say, those staff members must then come and be integrated into a BMA permanent structure of the BMA permanent in nature. In this instance, we just give a snippet at the higher level in terms of the 3 areas of work. So obviously, BMA will have 1 national office, but it will have 4 regional offices. So the country of 9 provinces is divided into 4, and the rationale for that is on the basis of the, I suppose, the realities that we have to be looking at, whether even in terms of the fiscus and otherwise. And of course, in terms of offices in all of those ports, as it were. Now, in terms of this description of a national office will look like, one of the things that we want to be very clear with the committee members had always been this issue about structures being top heavy, where people end up with a lot of positions that might be just for in case. In terms of BMA, you will realize that the structure is more lean and mean and more targeted. You will note that the BMA Act was very much explicit at the 3 levels, at the 2 levels in terms of leadership, to indicate there shall be a commissioner and there shall be only 2 deputy commissioners, one for operations and one for corporate service. So that is a law provided provision. We can't do much about that. So that is why, as you will know, those are the 2 key positions, 3 key positions that are filled in as far as this structure is concerned. Now, below the deputy commissioner operations, of course, those are the key areas targeted to the actual work that must be done. If you look at the extreme left, that is the chief officer for border control. And you will remember, we have to be divided into 4 regions, which means there has to be 4 regional commanders working below that particular chief officer, who is more of your national commander in a way, in terms of border control. So you will see there that we have the northern region, which is effectively Limpopo and Northwest. We have your eastern region, which is Mpumalanga as well as KZN. We have your southern region, which is all the 3 provinces, the 3 Cape provinces. And then we have the central region, which is Gauteng and the Free State. So the regional commanders will then be reporting to the chief officer for border control. At the bottom end, you will realize we have the 5th executive manager there, and that particular executive manager is effectively going to be responsible for the special response team, which is more of your special task force, if you talk military or police language. I am not going to try and go into details of each of these issues. Suffice to say, if you look at these particular portfolios here, you will realize that it is more targeted and it's more directed. The second chief officer is responsible for the National Risk and Targeting Management. That is where the National Targeting Center is going to be located. You will be aware of the key issues that we need to be doing in as far as that part is concerned. Of course, the other one there is to set the norms and standards to make sure that we do border management as it is done even in other jurisdictions globally, and therefore complies with some of the protocols set out in other global platforms, whether it's your World Trade organizations and things of that nature. And of course, on the extreme right, we do have the corporate colleagues. So if we can just talk rank as an example within the context of what I presented. So obviously there is a commissioner there, and there are deputy commissioners as you see them, and below them is those assistant deputy commissioners. I mean, the assistant commissioners, and below that, what we call executive managers, those are the deputy assistant commissioners. This is then that top structure that I referred to earlier. And of course, from here, we are able to then move to the regional level. I wouldn't spend much time on the regional level. Suffice to say, it moves from that area of border control, and then you will then have the port commander, who is then the port commander for each and every port. You will be aware that our ports have been categorized into 3 levels, so that we know that Beitbridge cannot be similar with Cassius Neck, for example. Even the level of the port commander won't be necessarily the same and all of that. So this is the issue. But what is more important just to indicate is the manager specialized services in the middle there is where we start to integrate some of the colleagues there coming from all of those various areas that are more into agriculture, immigration, as well as health, as well as the environment. So they are to be integrated in as far as this part is concerned. And of course, this was the regional level 1. I jumped it a bit. So these are the regional level 1, immigration specialists, the agriculture level specialists. These are people sitting at the regional level to be able to make sure that the work at the ports is supported in all of those areas of specialization. And of course, this is now what you will then have the actual port. In there is going to be a manager for specialized services at each and every port. And that is where all of those integrated staff will then be found. So if we then move towards the end of the brief project implementation timeline. This is just to demonstrate some of the issues that we are finalizing, being assisted here. And the key issue that we are working on here is to be able to make sure that some of this ICT, HR, and all of those kind of base issues are effectively done and are actually finalized as we go into the next financial year. But this particular work here, we can also just indicate before the committee that we are being assisted by experts from external environment to make sure that we fulfill all of these issues that are very much critical for us to be able to function as an organization. Now, if we then conclude, as I've indicated, we have now spoken to labor, we are finalizing the document for the integration, and to that extent, we should then be able to start going to talk to the staff members on the ground. So we thought we just needed to give you just a look in terms of how we are going to go to those regions, as I've indicated. So we are going to go to the 4 regions as earlier demonstrated from the 5th of December, and we are going to be doing this work with labor. I can also declare here before the committee members that the one that you have as distributed, we were supposed to start this program next week on Monday, and that is why the one you have, it will still talk about, I think, 28th or so of November. We have pushed it forward because there were some issues with labor that we needed to finalize. We want to do this work with labor so that the trust levels between us and the staff on the ground is at par. Because once we don't have labor in our hand, it's going to be very much difficult. There might be some challenges along the way. So basically, this is just for you to note that we are going to be entering into that process from the 5th of December, and then we should be set in as far as that part is concerned. Now, in terms of conclusion, we're just saying that note the progress that we have made. I think the committee members will be aware that now we have moved away from those technical or the high level discussions we're talking about. Now we've been more talking into the specifics about how we are going to integrate the people and how all of those issues are going to unfold. And we're just saying, continue to support us as we do this work. And of course, we still want to promote the catchphrase, we intend to secure borders for development and ultimate jurisdiction. So this in short is the update in terms of where we are in operationalizing the BMA. And we do hope, Honorable Chair, when we come to the 4th quarter, which will be sometimes in the new year, either in March or so, we should be giving you now the final activities that we would have put on the table to make sure that by the 1st of April, indeed, we are able to function as a standalone Schedule 3A public entity. So, Honorable Chair, if you can allow, we can then move quickly to the last presentation on the regulations, which will be done by Advocate Malakate. I'll just do the sharing of that particular slide.
Thank you, Commissioner. Advocate Malakate.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, members of the committee. Good morning, Minister, Deputy Minister, and DG, as well as the Commissioner and the Deputy Commissioner. So the presentation that is before now the Portfolio Committee, it's in relation to the 2 sets of regulations that the department, together with the Office of the Commissioner, through the Minister of Home Affairs, needs to develop and gazette in order to implement the Border Management Authority Act. So this slide just simply provides the outline of the presentation that we are going to present to the Portfolio Committee. We just going to indicate the purpose of the presentation, but also to provide the Portfolio Committee with the update on the work that we have done in terms of the regulations that needs to be made and gazetted in terms of Section 25(2) of the Border Management Authority Act. Then the other issue that we would need to present to the Portfolio Committee is in relation to the work that we have done in terms of the general empowering provision under Section 36 of the Border Management Authority Act, which then empowers the Minister of Home Affairs to make regulations that are required under the Act. And then the last part would be just to make recommendations to the portfolio committee for the portfolio committee to note and also to assist going forward. If we can just move to the second slide, to the next slide. So the purpose of the presentation, Chair and honorable members of the committee, is to provide the committee with an update on the draft regulations to be made under Section 25(2) of the Act, but also to request the portfolio committee to provide comments on the draft regulations in relation to Section 25(2) that has already been provided to the portfolio committee as mandated under Section 36(6) of the Border Management Authority, so that we are then able to proceed and gazette this set of regulation for implementation. If we can move to the next slide. The next slide, when we have to deal with Section 25(2) regulations, we just want to remind the portfolio committee that you would recall that the president had in 2020 signed the BMA bill into law after it had been approved by Parliament, and that on the 6th of July 2021, last year, the president then signed the proclamation in order to bring into operation Chapter 3 of the Act, and that chapter deals with Section 24, Section 25, Section 26, and Section 27 of the Border Management Authority Act. Just by way of information, Chair and the honorable members of the committee, Section 24 establishes the Interministerial Consultative Committee. There are no regulations that are required under Section 24. Section 25 then provides for the establishment of the Border Technical Committee, and then Section 26 deals with other advisory committees, and 27 deals with the implementation protocols that needs to be provided. So the proclamation was then gazetted on the 9th of July in order to bring into operation Chapter 3. Now, the gazetting of this proclamation then gave rise to the department and the realization that once Chapter 3 is brought into operation, Section 25(2) of the Act then requires the Minister of Home Affairs to then provide a set of regulation in terms of which the section requires that the Minister of Home Affairs must then tabulate the heads of organ of state or their duly delegated representatives, to who would then form part of the Border Technical Committee. Now, what then becomes imperative is that the Minister of Home Affairs must then come up with a regulation to then indicate who are these heads of these organs of state that would then form part of the Border Technical Committee. And if then we tabulate the heads of these organs of state, in the event that a head of the organ of state then delegates his or her function to a representative, for that representative to then form part of the BTC, the representative must be a member of the senior management services within the organ of state. So basically, these are the sets of regulation, one set of regulations that we are bringing before the portfolio committee in order to deal with the heads of the prescribed organs of state. If we move to the next slide, this slide then ties back to what the Minister of Home Affairs is then required to do. In terms of Regulation 2, the draft Regulation 2, the Minister of Home Affairs has indicated that the heads of organs of state that are required under Section 25(2) would be the Director General for the Department of Home Affairs, the Director General for the Department of Health, the Director General for the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, the Director General for the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, the Director General from the Department of Transport, from the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, South African Police Services, South African Revenue, South African National Defence Force, and State Security Agency. Chair, you will read, and the honorable members of the committee, you will realize that these are the critical departments in terms of giving effect to what Section 97 of the proclamation has indicated, but more so giving effect to the effectiveness of the border the workings of the Border Management Authority through the technical aspect relating to the work that is done by the BMA. So if we move to the next slide, then the Regulation 3 just simply deals with issues related to the naming of the regulations themselves, and as advised by the Office of the Chief State Law Advisor, we have named these regulations as the Border Technical Committee regulations in order to tie it back to the naming of the BTC itself as it comes out from Section 25. The Regulation 4 just simply indicates that the regulations will come into operation on the date on which they are published in the Government Gazette. And this will then follow the processes that we would have endeavored into in terms of getting the necessary approvals, part of which will be coming up under the slides that are going to be flighted. What we have done, Chair and the honorable members of the committee, is that in line with the development of subordinate legislation as well as legislation, we needed to send the draft regulations to the Office of the Chief State Law Advisor in order for the Chief State Law Advisor to advise us on the constitutionality of the draft regulation, but also on whether or not they conform to the drafting convention within South Africa, but more so that they do not offend already promulgated domestic legislation. So we received the legal opinion from the Office of the Chief State Law Advisor, and primarily the Office of the Chief State Law Advisor has then agreed with us to say that reiterated that the draft regulations, in fact, the Minister of Home Affairs is indeed empowered to make the regulations as mandated under Section 25(2). They further advise us that the regulations have to be gazetted for public comments, and we are in the process of requesting Minister to give us approval and then gazette these regulations. But we also need to then table the regulations before Parliament for a period of 30 days for comments and as envisaged under Section 36. And also that the regulations should also be published in terms of in line with the official languages, in 2 official languages, so as to comply with Section 2 of the Constitution. So, Chair, the only thing that I can also indicate to the Portfolio Committee is that in order for us to go forward and gazette the regulation for implementation, we are also requesting, as mandated under Section 36, that the Portfolio Committee would need to have provided us with their views and their comments in relation to the draft regulations as tabled. And thereafter, we'll then be able to approach the Minister of Home Affairs to get the necessary approval for us to then proceed and gazette the regulations for implementation. If we can move to the next slide. So this is just to reiterate the steps that we have endeavored after receiving the legal opinion from Oxley. We then requested the Minister to approve in principle approve the draft regulations in terms of Section 25(2), but also to request the Minister to sign the 2 requisite letters, and the one letter to the Speaker of the National Assembly and the second letter to the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, in terms of which the Minister then tables the draft regulations as mandated in terms of Section 36(6) of the Act. So this, Chair, we had done, and I think this is the reason why we are here, just to align ourselves and to comply with Section 36(6). And thereafter, we will then gazette the regulation for public comments, and whereafter we'll then go back to the minister and request the minister, after having provided the background as well as the work that we had done, and request the minister to then approve the final regulations and then gazette the regulations for implementation thereafter. If we can move to the next slide. So the next slide, Chair, deals with the regulations that are to be made under as mandated in terms of Section 36. Section 36, Chair, and the members of the committee empowers the Minister of Home Affairs to make regulations in terms of which it would then allow for the full implementation of the Border Management Authority Act, but also to deal with or to develop and draft regulations or make regulations wherever the word prescribed appears in the text of the act. Now, what we have done, Chair, we had moved forward, and we, as a department, we drafted what we call a draft 0 of these regulations. And we had already presented the draft regulations to the Border Technical Committee. We had also presented the draft regulations to the IMCC, and we got comments and inputs in relation to the draft regulations. However, these draft regulations still require to be developed further. Just by way of an example, Chair, is that the Act requires that the Commissioner of the Border Management Authority must establish a national targeting center. And the National Targeting Center must be established following a prescribed process, but also in terms of saying that there has to be regulations that then fully indicate and explain what this National Targeting Center would be. Now, that regulation has not yet been developed, and it has been developed at a draft 0 level, but it requires to be developed further. So those are the issues and the areas that are still required to be developed further. So in looking at the department's human resource capacity within the directorate drafting, we then realize as a department that there is a need, given the capacity constraints, that the department should then appoint an independent legislative drafter to finalize the draft regulations. But that also means that when we have appointed the independent legislative drafter, that will the independent legislative drafter would have to work hand in hand with the department, as well as the office of the commissioner from the BMA, in order to develop and finalize the regulations. And we are anticipating that we are going to have done everything and all the work that is required in terms of this regulation before the end of February 2023, and that this would be well ahead of the establishment of the BMA as a Schedule 3A entity on the 1st of April 2023. So, Chair, this is the work that we had done, and this is the work that we still need to do going forward. So the next slide just simply deals with the recommendations that we would wish to request from the portfolio committee going forward, and we are recommending that the portfolio committee should take note of the work and the progress that has been made in terms of developing the regulations under Section 25(2), as the minister has tabled them before the portfolio committee or before Parliament, and also to request the portfolio committee to then provide us with the requisite comments as we are mandated under Section 36(6) in relation to the draft Border Technical Committee regulations, but also to request the portfolio committee to note the progress made that has been made in terms of developing the regulations under Section 36, which is a general empowering provision mandating the Minister of Home Affairs to make the regulations under the Act. And Chair, just also to indicate that once the Minister has approved these regulations under Section 36, the Section 36 still mandates us to then request the Minister to table the regulations before Parliament for a period of 30 days and to request the Parliament to provide its comments. So this will then be the process that we would still follow when we have finalized the regulations under Section 36 of the Act. Chair, I thank you and the Portfolio Committee.
No, thanks, commissioners, for the detailed brief on the work that you have entrusted. We are now going to interact with the reports or the presentation that you've made. I will invite members to comment or raise questions, and thereafter I will then able to invite you again to respond. We'll then invite Deputy Minister and the Minister to close the remark, to make closing remark or respond on the issues that members could have been raised in the meeting.
Chair?
Yes, Minister?
Yeah, just one small addition before people ask questions, so that when they interact with the report, it can include that. Just to mention that the border guards were not yet designated peace officers under the law, which means every action they had to take, including these 27 cars, they've confiscated the Daha and all that. In other words, search and seizure, they could not do it without the presence of a police officer from SAPS because they were waiting for that. Yesterday, I've just spoken to the Minister of Justice and checked with his office. He has actually signed. They are busy preparing a government gazette. Once the gazette passes, it means all the border guards have got the status of peace officers. They can search and do seizure work under the Criminal Procedure Act. They may even arrest you in the absence of a police officer if they think you need to be arrested. I just thought I need to report that because it's a very important development. Thank you very much.
No, thanks very much for that intervention. Members will then interact with the reports that have been updated, reports that have been presented to our attention. I will invite Honorable Kanyile, Honorable Mukhale, Honorable Rose, and Honorable Mutise. Mr. Matwens, you'll assist us if members have joined so that other members have joined so that we also recognize them for contributions. In that order, Honorable Kanyile.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning to you. Good morning to everyone in the meeting. We acknowledge both the presentations that are before us today and commend the developments that have been made by the team so far. However, Chairperson, I do have a few questions that I would like to raise. I have noted that in terms of the intervention to deal with to prepare for the festive season, there's been a number of officials that has been increased in various posts. What I would like to know, I think that I did not get from the presentation is that, so was there proper consultation that was done with the neighboring countries? Because if you will remember very well, in 2021, we had numerous reports that there was a long traffic, I think, in the Beit Bridge and Libombo, which prompted us as a portfolio committee to go and conduct an oversight. And one of the issues that we discovered there was the fact that there was no proper communication with the neighboring countries and the other issues that were raised, but I do believe that they have been addressed. I have seen on some of the slides today. I would appreciate if I can be provided with that clarity. And secondly, Chairperson, I have noted also that in terms of the temporary infrastructure that has been requested, there is a slide that speaks to bottled water that have been requested and water tanks. I need clarity that does the department really need the bottled water to go together with the water tanks? And I also believe that there are taps there. Can they provide us clarity so that we can understand that if they get the water tanks, maybe they won't be getting any bottled water? And the Chairperson, another issue or question that I have is that what role, if any, will the Border Management Authority play in the repair of the very porous and often non-existent border fence between South Africa and Zimbabwe? That is all from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your contributions, Honorable Kanyile. Honorable Mohale. Honorable Ross.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Commissioner Masiapato for your presentations, which were very informative. And we wish you well for the challenging December period. And I sincerely hope our annual trip to Beitbridge and Lambombo in January is going to be called off this year. Firstly, I want to just look at the issue of the area around the border posts as part of that December-January program. And we always see kilometers of trucks, and there are persons that, there are deaths reported. There's a crisis along the road. There's 2 rows of trucks, et cetera, and you say you're going to look at that from a policing point of view or a monitoring point of view. But just to understand in terms of these infrastructure requirements, are they going to be also along that line going inside of South Africa? I know previously there's been discussions of the need for holding areas for trucks that are away from the border and having ablution facilities and places where persons can buy food and that there. So I just want to get an understanding of this infrastructure. Is it also going to be along the road to avoid those kind of situations again? If you can just give us a bit more detail about that. Then I got a call from outside Byron Place again this morning, and picketing, bringing services to a standstill, people standing there trying to get a passport, and it's just not possible. What are the plans in place to prevent the same thing happening at our border posts, where persons just down tools and decide they're not going to work because they understand that there's an opportunity? If you can please give us some comfort in that regard. And then it looks like the full BMA Border Guard force is going to be deployed to the border posts, as well as public order police. Will this not leave the rest of the borderline exposed? And what are the plans to continue looking after the rest of the borderline while we clearly and obviously need to give some more attention to the border posts? What is going to happen on the rest of the borderline to just ensure that it's not now exposed? A further question just on the border guards is how's the performance of the border guards measured? Are there specific metrics that they need to achieve? And how do they get a bonus? On what basis would they receive a bonus? Then in slide 21 of 29, I think it was the middle presentation, there's a national office organogram with about 30 people. I think there's just over 30 people on it, the senior management structure. Are these new appointments, or will these roles be moved from other structures? Then I want to on to the coastal areas. So the National Maritime Security Strategy, it's apparently, or we're told that it's going to be available by the 1st of April next year. And it will incrementally secure ports and the coastal areas and our ocean domains. So if we can just get an indication of what is this ramp up going to look like, And what are the engagements between the BMA and the Department of Defense on the eventual integration of the Coast Guard into the BMA? Then in terms of the integration of the departments, I'd just like to understand, you will get various staff and they will come in at different levels and they might have different salary structures. Will all those salary structures be then lifted up to the highest pay grade inside that? If you can just give us also an indication of how that is going to work, because I'm not 100% sure, but it is possible when you integrate multiple entities or persons from different entities that some are on different packages and scales to other. Then in closing, looking at the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, there's mention of regional information systems and the need for this. So regional labor information systems, passport information systems, etc., so that this information is more integrated at a regional level. What is the progress on this at present? And will this fall under the BMA or does it fall under DHA Immigration Services? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Ross, for your contributions. Honorable Modise Msa.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Let me also take this opportunity and appreciate the much informative presentations that we have received today from the commissioners, and also to commend the efforts and the strides and the progress that since the establishment of the BMA, at least it is felt on the ground. Just a few things, Chair. One, the commissioner would have made mention that what is done on this side of the border must be done on the other side. I just want to check, is there any formal or a written cooperation or an understanding with the BMA and our counterparts on the other side of the borders to ensure that they also employ the same efforts on the ground to control and manage our borders during the festive season? Or is it just a verbal communication or talks between the BMA and the counterparts on the other side? Secondly, Chair, they've made mention that there'll be an extra human resource that will also be deployed on our borders. And that, of course, speaks to additional costs that must be carried. Just to check, Chair, that who exactly will be carrying those extra costs of paying for extra additional infrastructure on the ground and overtimes that will be paid to additional members that will be deployed during the festive season? Will it be the BMA itself? Will they carry the costs, and have they adequately budgeted for that, or will it be the departments involved that will then have to carry those additional costs that will come with the festive season deployments to our borders? And again, Chair, we are aware that on the 200 cohorts of bodyguards that have been deployed the past few months did not necessarily receive an extensive force training, but rather they would have been given some sort of an induction, a short-term induction, and thereafter subsequently they were deployed into the border post. We know that part of the challenges that we have with our borders, it is not only the lack of the border fences that we might not have, or inadequate border fences. It is also the human or individuals that are corruptible or that can easily take bribes and then allow illegal persons to cross over and come into our country. Now, just to check with the BMA, what plans do they have to ensure that the conduct of these cohorts of guards that have been deployed, really they carry high standards and they remain very principled and avoid what we could have experienced with the members of the SAPS or of those of the Defense Force would have been found to have been on the wrong side of the law or would have done the ills. I think that will be all, Chair, from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Disemza. Any member who, Honorable Mukhale? Okay. Though two issues which I wanted to check with the commissioners. You mentioned that part of the obstacle to fill up your executive component is in relation to the allocation, which was pronounced by the Minister of Finance, and there's a commitment to that effect. I wanted to check the time frame or turnaround time in terms of that which was committed. You were indicating that in a few days' time, you will be able to receive, if that is an understanding from the executive. I'm reading that the minister just confirmed the interaction he had with the Minister of Justice in terms of the process that they need to undertake, and there was a sign of a commitment to that effect. So I wanted just to run out because it's an important area to make sure that the functions of the Border Management Authority are carried to the fullest, and whether the sufficient budget as you move towards the festive season. The other area which I think perhaps you may need to expand more is on the cooperation, and I hear Honorable Mutisemta and Honorable Kanyile pay more attention to that, which is an important area in terms of our interaction with the neighboring countries, particularly that we are forming part on the treaties that we have signed. Looking at the Beit Bridge, you're fully aware that the Limpopo government, they are currently in their establishment or in the process of the SCZ, which will impact more in terms of the trade relation, particularly in that front line of our neighboring countries. Your presentation is not exposing that, and I think it will be more important because obviously there'll be, as there'll be more threats that are exposed once that two parallel measure projects with the BMA and the SCZ in that front. What are the interaction you had? If not, what is the plan in terms of interaction with the government of Limpopo? I'm fully understanding you, Commissioner, in terms of the demobilization of your faces. This demobilization, is it informed by the resource allocations, or is there any reason? And I'm raising this because BMA is just being established now, and a lot of work that need to go on the ground in all the ports of entry throughout the country. What is the long term to sustain what you have planned? The work that has been demonstrated during the Easter holiday, I'm sure it can be carried more. And in that front, what were the experience, weaknesses that you have identified in your operation and that you need to improve? I think those are the issues that I wanted just to link up with your team. We'll then invite the commissioner. You will delegate to the two commissioners, and then we'll then get the Director General to get the Deputy Minister and the Minister to round up. If there's any follow-up, members will then come in. Commissioner.
Thanks, Honorable Chair, and thanks to the committee members for the reflections in terms of the presentation. Indeed, the colleagues are here. They will then be able to come through with some of the responses. General Chilembe will fairly cover the issues around the operations, especially the issues that had been raised about additional infrastructure and all those. And then Deputy Commissioner for Corporate Service will cover on issues around the capacitation of the structure, as well as the issues around the finances in terms of our requests to National Treasury, in terms of the MTech, as well as the medium-term budget policy statement pronouncements by the minister. So those will be the responses coming from the colleagues, and of course, the DG and the rest of the other colleagues and the minister, the DM will also reflect on some of the issues. Let me then start with some of the broader issues in terms of the issues raised. I think the main issue that is coming out very clearly is the issue of the need for the engagement with our stakeholders. I want to just confirm that point, because that has been one of the biggest challenges that we had, especially around the lot of queues that get generated on the corridor. If you look at N4 in terms of Lubombo, you look at N1 in terms of Beitbridge, there has been some bid, obviously, to Maseru Bridge, but not that much. But fairly, it was Lubombo and Beitbridge that has always been a problem. One of the challenges had primarily been about that synchronization of plans between ourselves and our immediate neighbors. So as we did in Good Friday, and as we have done even now, we have intensified those engagements with those neighboring countries with the view of starting to address that particular reality. It is a fact that even if we might be processing trucks a bit quicker on our side, if our immediate neighbor is not able to reciprocate, the queues will still build up. So we had to sit down with them and we had to agree with them in terms of synchronizing our processes and also our plans to be able to facilitate that. We did that in Good Friday, it worked well, and we hope we should be able to deal with that in the intervening period. The other issue that we had also engaged on, and Mr. Avele is here, he had been part of those engagements which he had negotiated even before we came on board, was the issue of the truck stops, particularly on the N1 towards Beitbridge. One of the biggest problems around that issue was the issue of different prices that had been charged, to those truck companies. We had to engage to make sure that they synchronize the fees so that truck drivers don't avoid to go to truck parks, primarily because of financial issues. So that also contributed in addressing the volumes, especially on the N1 in this particular period. But the third issue that also contributed, we did it in Good Friday, and as I've said, we have started engaging on it, is engaging with the Freight Forwarders Association, particularly the one that is led by Madam Juanita, which is having a majority of these trucking companies, to say that at the apex of this festive period, as I've indicated, the 24th and also the 31st and all of those periods, is to make sure that we don't necessarily bring high volumes of trucks to go compete with people that needs to exit the country. And we have managed to get some cooperation to that extent, and that had actually started to assist. So as the General had indicated broadly, honorable members and the chair, around the issue of our ability to do corridor management, we have actually realized that that had always been a problem. Our initial plans that we have done before, they were more looking internal, inside the port, and how we are supposed to do activities inside the port. And there has been not too much effort to deal with the corridor management. So our bringing in of the multiple stakeholders in terms of corridor management has started to assist in as far as these issues are concerned. That is why our engagement with the Road Traffic Management Corporation, as well as the local traffic police, as well as the provincial structures, had started assisting in as far as that issue is concerned in terms of addressing some of these things. So those are some of the issues that we have started to be doing. And we do hope, by the way, Honorable Ruas, that indeed there might not be necessarily a need for your visitation in January. It might be for the other reasons, but we do hope that we should be able to address the issues of the volumes and make sure that everybody exits appropriately as it is supposed to be. So that is the broader reflection that I wanted to just give in terms of making sure that we are all at one on that. The colleagues will come to cover some of the other issues, but let me also address the broader issue raised by the chair, Honorable Chabane, around the development of the SCZ, the Musina Makado Special Economic Zone. Maybe just to indicate that I am part of that engagement. I have been brought into that engagement, which is led by the Department of Economic Development in the Limpopo province. And I am part of those discussions. We are fairly understand all the plans that they have. And as they continue to engage and as they continue to move in the development of that SCZ, we are already even giving them our plans around the redevelopment and the redesigning of the 6 ports, because that is the long-term plan, ultimately. I mean, the general spoke about the choke points that we are having as a reality in terms of our ports of entry. So that is a historical reality that we need to correct. And the only way to correct it is to be able to do redesigning. And I think the committee members will remember the project around the 6 ports that has been identified to be redesigned, redeveloped. Of which Beitbridge, Lubombo is one of those, Maseru Bridge, Kopfontein, Oshuk, and the like. So that work is ongoing. Suffice that the issues are being finalized at National Treasury for us to be able to get a private partner to be able to start moving in that direction. But Honorable Chabane, that is the long term. So the long term is, as we redesign the ports, particularly Beitbridge in this instance, in line with the SCZ, there will be those special lines that will then be created for the trucks, which will then be able to cater the high volumes of truck traffic that will be coming from the Musina Makado SCZ. So that is how the planning is. But we do know in any event that the issue of the redesigning of the ports is a long-term project in the same way that the SCZ is a long-term project. So we do believe, as we engage with them, that at their point of convergence, we should be able to complete both projects around at the same time, which will then be able to address the rest of the issues in the longer term as indicated. So I think for now, we can then be able to allow the colleagues to, maybe let me also address a bit this point, which Honorable Modise raised. Then I will allow the commissioners to come around how do you integrate the staff whilst the staff comes from different salary levels and salary structures and all of those issues. Honorable Ruos, the key issue around that point is that this work could have been too complicated if, for example, we were integrating, let's say, SARS as an example, or even probably integrating even SAPs, as it were. But we are not. So if you look at the departments, these departments are conventionally in government, and they come with almost a seamless salary levels or salary structures. And that is why we are able to even speak confidently that with the people we are integrating, the highest person we are integrating is a director. We don't have any chief director, DDG, or anybody of that standard or that level that is integrated. The highest is a director. The majority of them are sitting at level 8, level 9, and all. So they are more synchronized. And therefore, it is not necessarily going to be that much of a difficult task. But we can also declare to you, Honorable Ruos and the committee members, that the complexity we have is this thing called OSD, Occupational Special Dispensation, which has been given to some of the experts that are working in port health environment, which is the National Department of Health. There we have people sitting at a lower level, but they get higher salaries because of their expertise, and they were enrolled in the Occupational Special Dispensation. So that is the only complexity, but we are working very much hard together with labor to make sure that the integration is going to be seamless. So all of those issues, we should be able in the presentation of the fourth quarter to yourself to actually even indicate that we have successfully managed to do that. As we speak, we are then, we are putting all of the mechanisms in place to make sure that nobody is going to be affected negatively in the process, as it were. So that is basically the essence. I'll allow the general to also reflect around what have we done to make sure the border guards are not easily corruptible and all of those questions. So that at least the colleagues can also come through and reflect on some of these things. So maybe without necessarily indicating which question in particular the colleagues must cover, let me allow them, Honorable Chair, to come through, and then if anything is missed, I will then come kind of back to make sure that all the questions are covered. Maybe let's start with Madam Tupana to address the issues that are HR and corporate in nature, and then General Chilembe will follow after that. With your permission, Honorable Chair.
No, thanks very much. You can proceed.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to honorable members and ministers and deputy minister. Chair, the Commissioner has already covered on the issue of integration of staff, and I hope Honorable Ross would have been covered in that part. The only last part that I can cover is on the executive top level structure that you had seen, and whether those are new positions or whether are they coming with the staff that's being integrated. Partially, the Commissioner had covered that by indicating the level of the people that are coming over, and I can just confirm that these are new positions apart from the Commissioner and Deputy Commissioners. These are new positions that are meant to lift the, or root the back office structure of the organization to have that kind of level of executive as indicated, and the roles and positions speak for themselves, particularly in the core area and as well in the support part. For example, the ICT a top structure there that would indicate indeed, as the mission would indicate and vision, we're looking at an organization that would be technologically driven, and the structure there would indicate how we are meant to make sure that this is indeed technologically driven and based on high level technology. The other levels are just, the other positions, as you had seen, just your ordinary CFO level and facilities. Those are the standard kind of executive positions that exist in any organization. And lastly, I can just mention that the integrated staff is only the staff that works with the frontline functions of border management at port level. The back office that had been supporting these people is remaining with their mother departments, because those were shared services in the departments. And that is why the BMA has to establish this back office structure. But just Chair, to confirm, these are new positions. The one element that I can just add in terms of what the Commissioner had indicated in terms of the integration, harmonization, whether we are harmonizing upwards, the Public Service Act is clear about people needing to be transferred at the same level as they come. If there are growth opportunities and higher positions, such positions will be applied for, and they will fit in those positions through the normal recruitment process. But there is no automatic, upward movement of people as they come into the BMA. So that was just to add on to what the Commissioner had explained already. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Madam Tupana, General.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just wanted to apologize that I've been kicked out many times today on the meeting. As a contingency, I'm sitting with Commissioner Tupana. We're using one system. Chairperson, just to underscore the broader issues that were mentioned by the Commissioner, I will start with the first one that was asked by Honorable Kanyile, whether there are consultations with the counterparts. In our slide 4 on the presentation, we are mentioning that as a directive, that each and every port of entry in their plan, they should be engaging with the counterpart in order and share the plans with them. For example, if I can give the Beitbridge or the Libombo issue, you know that we functioning on the kilometer 4 and the kilometer 7 on the Libombo. The officials from Mozambique, they come over on our side, and those that are able to go on the other side also from our side, they do. However, we are looking at all the issues of jurisdiction, that maybe those departments or officials who cannot function in another country, then they are not, they don't go to the other side. Those are the measures that we have put in place with regards to that. And further to that, these issues are also discussed at higher level at the BNC, Binational Commission between the two countries, that whenever we plan, we have got also a positive comments from on high level at the BNC on the plans that we are putting in place. With regards to Honorable Ross, I think the Commissioner has covered mostly on the issue of the trucks and the infrastructure that we are putting on the ground in order to cover those corridors. And further to that, the contingency plan or mitigating plan that I have mentioned earlier, which is as part of the PDF that we have sent to you, covers all those issues that Honorable Rose have asked with regards to the issue of how do we handle the trucks, and also the fact that we have also involved the business unit in South Africa, those that are responsible for the trucks, to we work together with them in order to see what are the challenges that they are facing and how can they help us in making sure that everything goes well. In terms of picketing, that issue is also covered on the contingency. However, I can just mention that what we normally do, there's a procedure that we follow, is that whenever there are people who are picketing, they are being given or allocated a space within the port environment where they can do their allocation. And normally what we do under the Section 4 meetings that are either called by the municipality or by those that are affected by the picketing or the strike, there are certain rules that we agree with those that will be picketing, that they will be given that space where they can picket, but they must not close the roads. However, as a mitigation, we also then bring in public order police to look at whether they are conforming to those rules that we have agreed with them at those Section 4 meetings. With regards to the deployment in the borderline, as Honorable Rose have mentioned, that it looks like we're concentrating more on the port. Yes, it is true. We concentrate at the port, and we also concentrate on the borderline. As when we're presenting, we've seen the number of defense members that have been allocated to each and every port that will be responsible for those areas of the vulnerable areas in the borderline, and working hand in hand with the border guards. The other issue that was raised by Honorable Ross was the issue of the coastal areas. We are also coordinating that with all the departments that has got to do with the coastal areas. Just to mention, Honorable Ross, that we had a visit by the Coast Guard from America under the Department of Transport. They came to South Africa. We shared ways in which how that it should be done, and we also had a reciprocal visit to the US that was done in the last 2 weeks. But the lead agency there being the Department of Transport. In terms of Modise, what is done at the border must be done on the other side. of the border. It is true, Honorable Chair, that that's the process that we are doing when we request our officials to have bilateral meetings with the counterpart, engaging on the plan. And even if you visit those ports, you'll be able to see the source documents that is shared between the two ports. In terms of additional cost will be carried by each department. It won't be carried by the BMA. Hence, we're showing this in the phases, the planning phase, that we plan for the numbers of people that should be added, and also on the budget. So the departments that have got to do with border control then confirm the numbers that will be sent to the port, and also confirm the overtime applications that will be given. Just to look at the issue of the border guards, what is it that we're doing in order for them not to fall into the issue of corruption or collusion. What we are doing there, Chairperson, is that we have supervision, close supervision. The chief border guards are doing a close supervision to the border guards, and we have made sure that command and control is the issue of the day that should be done on daily basis. And also we have effective deployment. As you know, that the ports of entry have got an entry and exit site. That's where we are mainly deploying the border guards in order to sanitize the area with regards to who's entering and who's exiting. And we have also day-to-day briefing, sort of like an awareness programs, that they are always talking to the members on the ground on all the issues that they may face. The other question that was raised was the, okay, on the SCZ, the Commissioner has touched on that, the 6 identified ports would be able to deal with this issue of redesigning and redevelopment. On the demobilization, it is a point that on the 12th, when we demobilize, it doesn't mean that we are then leaving the port vulnerable, but we continue with the multi-agency approach in order to make sure that nothing else happens. I think those are the issues that I can raise. However, the PDF document, as I've mentioned earlier, it covers mostly the contingencies or the mitigation that we are doing on those points that have been identified as factors that are affecting the operations. Thank you, Chairperson.
No, thanks, General. Chair, maybe just to close up on the technical issues, then we will be done from our side. Just quickly around the issue that Honorable Khanyile raised as to what will be the role of the BMA in the construction of the border fence, particularly between us and Beitbridge. The minister, I suppose, should be able to cover that. He led the delegation of us with the Minister of Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, Minister Delil, around the fact that they are at advanced stages to rehabilitate it. From our side, it will be the issue of the requirements that we will then do jointly with the SANDF to them, and then they will then be able to ultimately find the appropriate infrastructure in as far as the border fence is concerned. But I think the minister can be able to add on that because he has been leading us on that basis. Maybe just Honorable Rose, something very practical about whether some of this infrastructure will be on the corridor. Indeed, when we talk about your chemical toilets, the water, potable water, is just to be on the corridor. You will remember in the previous instance, people were complaining that there's no toilet or ablution facilities on the way. People had to go to the bush and things. So that is why we are bringing those things on the corridor. It's not only just for the port. And of course, people will also be able to do their business there in terms of selling some food stuff and all of that, as you had asked. So I just wanted to make sure that that one is also covered. The other issue that the minister will reflect on, Honorable Ruos, is the issue of the Coast Guard. The only thing that we can indicate from our side is to say we are not yet there. That will be the other phase of BMA. For now, because remember the Coast Guard is more on the coastline. So we are just on the ports in the coast, but not necessarily on the coastline. So now it is still under the SNDF, and we hope in the future we'll get to that point you're raising. But Minister will be able to reflect on that because that is more sitting at the higher level. The issue around the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, as it were, indeed we agree, Honorable Ruos, that the establishment of BMA is to advance all of these issues of your, African Continental Free Trade area, as it were, and facilitating the trade and doing the ultimate integration. But your question is whether will those things be driven by BMA or be driven by the department. The issues that are of higher level, that are of policy in nature, and some of the higher level agreements, they will be entered in by the principal organ of state, which is the main department. We will then be entering into practical operational agreements that are more at port level. So that will then be the difference in as far as those issues are concerned. The last issue that I wanted to just say, so that at least we are fairly covered on this point, is this issue around the letter of commitment, which is the allocation letter from National Treasury. So Honorable Chabane, we can confirm that we are expecting to get that letter. The only delay was because the National Treasury wanted the signature of the CFOs from the 4 departments to confirm that indeed this is the money that is moving to BMA, so that when they have to allocate the new money that we have requested, the figures balance out. So we have given all of those documentation to them just in the past few days, and we are hoping that they will give us that allocation letter very soon. And once we get that, then we will have clear assurance as to how much do we have on the table, and we will be able to do the concrete planning, as it were, because financial or finances is going to be very much central for us to be able to cover on all of those issues. So Honorable Chair, I think we have tried everything possible to cover all of the questions. Suffice that Honorable Ruos was asking, what is the performance management system that we are deploying on the border guards? We can indicate that we are using the normal performance management system that is being used in government, because we are still in the transition in government. And on that basis, they did sign their performance agreements with very clear job descriptions. And I do know that you did ask this in one of the written questions, Honorable Ruos, that we responded in terms of the job descriptions of the border guards. They are there, they did sign them, and we do a review on them. You will remember they are still on probation, and of course they are going to be assessed as we go the process. But we use the normal Home Affairs-based performance management systems as they stand, with all of those various targets that are being provided for. So let me stop there, Honorable Chair, and allow the rest of the colleagues to come through in the lineup as you indicated. Thanks, Chair.
No, thanks very much, Commissioners and Deputy Commissioners, for your responses. Director General, any comment?
No, thanks, Chair. No further comments from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. Deputy Minister.
No, thank you, Chair. I think that the team has covered most of the issue I would have wanted to raise. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a few things. The question by Honorable Ruos about the logistics of water, tankers, and in the corridors and all that. At the beginning of his speech, he alluded to the effect of long queues of trucks, congestion, and death that the committee has had, that lots of people died at some stage, and that's why there was a pilgrimage of members of parliament to Beitbridge. It's important for me to clarify these things because, unfortunately, Chair, you are aware that once a story is planted in the media, it is difficult to remove. During that period when people were supposed to have died, at least 5 people, because of we're not providing them with water, it was hot, and they were trapped and all that. You'll remember that I came back to the committee to report that we did not find such reports, save the death of one person whose family actually informed us that they understand because of the ailments he was having, because he was already also elderly. But as to the other deaths, nobody could prove them to us. You remember that I even went to the trucking companies to tell them that it's not possible for a truck driver to die when he's employed by a company without that company having the name of everything. And each time we ask, the person who started the story will say, I had so-and-so, so-and-so, I had so-and-so. So you'll remember that at the end, there was no head or tail about 5 people dying there at the border because of congestion, save the one elderly person who was already sick. May his soul rest in peace. So I just want to clarify this matter because it looks like it's just sticking in forever. The other issue I want to clarify is this question by Honorable Modise Mja about our cooperation with our counterparts. We're trying very much, Chair, but as you know, the lack of a permanent structure on border management was always an impediment, and we're hoping now that there is BMA, it will be much better. For instance, if you look at Lebombo border post, much of the congestion of trucks happens on the South African side, but the problem is not on South Africa because systems in South Africa are automated and SARS clear trucks long before they arrive at the border. The congestion was that on the Mozambican side, things were still done manually, and some of the laws were against business. Like at some stage, they just said after 10 o'clock at night, no more trucks on the road. So any truck that arrives at Lebombo border post, and it is calculated that by 10 midnight, it will still be on the roads in Mozambique, would not be allowed through. It sleeps there at the border, and then obviously the others who come in the morning, they find it, and the congestion keeps on growing. So this is the problem we're having, and it's mostly on the side of customs, not immigration. I'm sure you know the difference. Customs is about goods, immigration is about people, and customs is under the tutelage of SARS, and immigration under Home Affairs. So most of the truck congestion is the issue of customs because of differences of system, whereby our SARS is working around the clock to try and make the neighboring countries also automate their systems. And we believe if we complete the one-stop border post system, it will become much better. The other issue, Honorable Modise Mja said the border guards were not extensively trained. I just want to remind honorable members that border guards were not just fetched from the streets. These were already trained people with some of the law enforcement agencies. Most of them were taken from the army and police, army reservists. They were already trained. They could handle a gun. So the training was just to make them sharper and sharper. So it's not that they were taken there for about 3 months, taken from the street. That was avoided, and that's going to happen in the next intake. And I'm sure the commissioner can attest to that or correct me as I'm wrong. So they were not really raw people who know nothing about security and all that. They've already been either in the police force or in the defense force. I need to explain the issue of Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement because there is generally a belief maybe that the BMA will be somehow, because this question was asked many times, how the BMA is going to either affect or either impede the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. I just want to clarify, honorable members, that the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement has got mainly 5 elements inside the agreement. The first one is to eliminate tariffs and non-tariff barriers for trade in goods. And this is done progressively. As you can see, it has got nothing to do with BMA or the Home Affairs Department. It's an issue that is agreed in offices between the various trade departments. So is the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition that will determine this issue of eliminating tariffs and non-tariff barriers, etc., which will then, the Department of Trade Industry will work together with Treasury and SARS on this issue. We won't necessarily be there, but will be informed of the outcome. The second element is to liberalize trade and services progressively. That also, liberalizing trade and services is not an issue of Border Management Authority or Home Affairs. It's again an issue of Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, working together with Treasury. The third element is cooperation on investment, intellectual property rights, and competition policy. Now, as you can see, the issues of investments, again, is Treasury and Trade in Industry. Intellectual property rights is, again, the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition. And competition policy is, again, that. And so it's not something that can be conducted by the BMA or the Department of Home Affairs. The fourth element is cooperation on all trade-related areas, which is again the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. And the last element is cooperation on customs matters. And customs matters, as you know, is SARS. What then is the role of BMA in the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement? The role of BMA really is to implement this agreement. If they've agreed that this and that type of goods should not be allowed to pass and give reasons, BMA will implement. If they then agree that there's been an agreement to liberalize this and that across the borders, and there's been an agreement with the respective departments, BMA will then implement. So mostly the function of BMA on the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is implementation of agreements that will have been made by the primary departments as such. And that's why, Chairperson, you are aware that from the beginning of April, the BMA will be a standalone entity, but it will be reporting to 9 ministers. And that's why among the ministers, which will be sitting as a sort of a board, which sits 4 times a year for the affairs of BMA. That's why there's a Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, and there's a Minister of Finance. It's because of the issues I've mentioned after Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. Otherwise, the people who operate at the borders every day are the other departments which the Commissioner has mentioned, like health, agriculture, forestry, fisheries and forestries and environment. But on the issues of trade, that's why we had to include Treasury and the Minister of Finance. I mean, the Minister of Finance and Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition. The last issue on the infrastructure, honorable members, obviously I know you are asking this question because you are definitely worried, as we all are, about the so-called washing line, which was put there by the Department of Public Works and called washing line by some members of parliament. Chairperson, the whole infrastructure at the borders will be under the control of the BMA, but that can only happen after April next year. For now, it will still be Public Works that is in charge. The Border Management Authority has got no right about that until it's a standalone entity, whereby it will take over the maintenance and construction of infrastructure at the borders. Now the question is, do we fold our arms and wait for April and repair nothing? The Department of Public Works and Infrastructure brought a plan to us that after the disaster of the fence at Beit Bridge, they developed a plan together with South African National Defence Force and consulting the BMA about what infrastructure to put up there. And they were asking whether they must stop that plan and wait over for the handover in April. I thought that would really take us backwards, because they told us this 8 months ago. I mean, sorry, about 2 months ago, when you add from January to April, it will take us to 7 or 8 months. And we thought losing that period won't be very wise, as long as they work together with the BMA and the Defence Force about what must happen in terms of infrastructure. That will be okay. But come the 1st of April, whatever they've done, they'll hand over to the to the BMA, and the BMA will take over the whole infrastructure project, including maintenance. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister, and the commissioners for the responses and further information that has been presented to our attention. We'll note the reports that have been presented, commend the work that has been done so far. And I think collectively the committee will work closely with the team, the commissioner, as always, the department, to make sure that where there are issues of concerns, members of the committee raises and comment, and the recommendations that arising from the meeting are carried, but also appreciating the good work that has been demonstrated to this far by the presentation that has been made. We want to thank you, members, for at all times navigating out the matters that involved the Border Management Authority. We'll take more interest when the regulations are going to be formally presented to the committee on the issues that members may have noted need to raise. And I think this is an important step forward in terms of consolidating the overall function of the Border Management Authority. At this point, I will going to end this item and appreciating that we've paid more attention to the work. When we meet Commissioner Masiapata, will then follow up on the work that you already have implemented. Your report also identifies some of the recommendations that you still have to interface with, and hope that in the fourth quarter, when we meet with the BMA on the updates towards closing up and become a sole entity, that report, as per the minister articulation, will then have a comprehensive, identifiable work that going to be undertaken by the Border Management Authority. Thank you very much. Mr. Matons, is there any other matter you want to raise?
Yes, Chairperson. It's just few things that I want to raise, Chairperson. This is in relation to a joint meeting, a request of a joint meeting by Polo Committee on Minerals and Energy and Police on to adopt the report of the oversight we conducted on the issue of Zamazamas illegal mining. But they proposed that now they want us to meet on Friday, 9 o'clock, this coming Friday, 9 o'clock, to adopt that report. I've emailed the report to all members so that now they could go through it, and then I'll request that if members have got issues that they want to add, if they can email those issues to me so that now we can integrate them into the report. That's one issue, Chairperson. The meeting is on Friday, the 25th this week. Then the other issue is on the 29th of November, we have already scheduled a meeting with the Commission for Gender Equality on their reports on women and elections that we have previously postponed. Yesterday, they wrote back to say, on the 29th and for that whole week, they are having a public hearing, so they were not able to meet with the committee because of that. And then, Chairperson, you remember I spoke to you that the Select Committee on Justice and Security, they will be finalizing the amendments, the proposed amendments on the electoral bill tomorrow. So there is a plan that it will be debated in the SOP on the 29th. So I was recommending that no, if we cancel the meeting of the 29th and then we apply for a meeting on the 30th of November to deal with those on the electoral amendment bill. And then the other issue is just an announcement is that there is a private members bill, registration of Muslim marriages, which was is a draft bill that was introduced yesterday by Honorable Hendricks for Al Jama. So it's a draft bill. We don't have to do anything for information at the moment, and then I'll get the bill and then email to members so that they can go. Probably they will introduce in the beginning of 2023. That's all, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Matonsi. Members, that are the two issues in the main. The joint committee meeting on Friday, and also the proposed date to receive a report on the electoral amendment bill on Wednesday. I'm sure will all of us not be far from that proposal. Is there any other view that need to be raised on the two issues that have been raised? Okay, so can confirm, Mr. Matonsi, that you can go ahead with the arrangement of Friday and also the arrangement on Wednesday. If the NCOP will pass that, they will consider then on Wednesday, we can then start to get a report on how far they went and what are the issues. And then your announcement on the Honorable Hendricks has been noted to this meeting. Is that fine, Mr. Matonsi?
Yes, Chairperson, is fine.
Thank you, members. Thanks very much, Minister, Commissioners, DG, and Deputy Minister, honorable members. Our meeting stands adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Chairperson.